This is Nick. He's a longtime friend and a gifted artist. We used to run crazy long distances together, ultra marathons. Now he's painting a mural in my shop while I build him a media console for his record player and vinyl collection. There's a lot more to this story, but let's get started. Now you may recognize this slab from my last project. This is the same giant black walnut slab that I built Chloe's desk from. And as you know, I got this kiln dry beauty from my friends over at Vintage Reclaimed Lumber in Oklahoma City. And if you stop in and tell them Jonny Build sent you, they'll hook you up with 10% off. How cool is that? The slab left over is the end with the large split after I cut it in half for the desk, and now I've got to decide which 4-foot section that I want to use. Now this frame I'm using is left over from a past project, and it's roughly the same size to the top of this media console, so I can use this to kind of lay out the design and the slab and visualize sort of what that end piece is going to look like. Now, one thing I'm gonna have to contend with is just how kind of rotted out some of this wood is in here. I was able to break this piece off earlier. This part right here, I'm gonna have to get all of that out because that's pretty rotten. If you see something like this on a piece of material, see how porous it is and just kind of how when you feel it, it's very crumbly. Yeah, you don't wanna work with anything like that. I need a 4-foot long piece, so I cut it 3 inches oversized just to give myself a little room to spare. This also leaves me with enough leftover material to do a third project if I was to do a 30-inch round coffee table. I'm actually thinking about doing a project video, building that with the leftovers, and then doing a giveaway of that piece to one of my viewers. So let me know down in the comments below if that's something that you would like to see. I'm gonna flatten the slab over on the CNC job of the cut. And instead of using my larger 2.5-inch flattening bit, I'm gonna use a 1.5-inch flattening bit. The 2.5-inch flattening bit throws way too much dust and the dust collector just can't keep up. And the last time I used it, my whole shop was covered in fine walnut brown dust. Plus bigger isn't always better, which I've been trying to explain to my wife for years now. Okay, now I can clean up all the rotted out wood in this void. I like to use a hammer to knock off the larger pieces and then hit it with this little machine called a restorer, and then come back through with this drill attachment called a flap wheel to get into those tighter spaces. Now I'll make sure to drop Amazon affiliate links for all these products that I'm using down in the video description. Okay, over to my epoxy pour workbench, and I'm getting it prepped to pour the epoxy. Also, after using this workbench for a couple months, there's some things I really like about it, and then some things that I really would change. I'm actually gonna build another work table, so be on the lookout for that video coming out soon. It's gonna be a cool build, of course, with free plans and no CNC required. You know, sometimes I'm not the sharpest tool in the box, but you know what is sharp? This beautiful Japanese kitchen knife from Husk Knives, the sponsor of today's video. And currently for my viewers, Husk is offering a 70% discount on their authentic Japanese knives. You can test the Husk knife for yourself worry-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now this deal isn't gonna last long, so make sure to click on that link down below and in the pinned comment. Now the first thing you notice about these Husk knives is just the quality and the craftsmanship of them. It's a beautifully constructed full tang knife with a hardwood oak handle and then this curved blade that has a hammered forged texture. Now the blade is high quality Japanese stainless steel. It's got a 38-degree blade edge that ensures extreme sharpness. This knife came out of the box razor sharp and ready to go, and it'll stay that way for years to come. The ergonomic grip and that finger hole provides for a more precision grip, which allows for safer handling, which then makes those kitchen food prep, cutting and chopping operations fun and easy. And did I mention how sharp the Husk knife is? Like, seriously sharp. A great knife can change the way you prep your food. Rather than buying a few cheap knives that will rust and dull easily, you get a professional quality, extremely sharp, and beautiful ergonomic knife that'll handle all your kitchen needs. And again, for my viewers, Husk is offering a 70% discount on their authentic Japanese knives. You can test the Husk knife for yourself worry-free with a full 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks to Husk Knives for sponsoring this video. All right, it's time to begin the epoxy pours, and I've got a little bit different strategy this go around. Normally I would use Total Boat's thick set epoxy or their Fathom epoxy. Both of them are deep pour systems, and I've got almost 2 inches that I need to pour, but I'm gonna use Total Boat's 2-to-1 high performance epoxy. The reason I'm gonna do that is because I'm gonna swirl in some pearl white pigment into the black epoxy that I'm using, and this way I'm gonna have more control over that process. With the deep pour system, you're less likely to have bubbles and you can pour it all in one go, but then you have to monitor it for hours while you wait for it to gel up, and when it starts to gel, that's when you're able to swirl in and get that really nice pattern. With the high performance, the trade-off is you're more prone to have bubbles, so you really have to stay on top of it and be careful, but you can only do 1/4 inch pours at a time. You know, 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, and I absolutely hate that saying. Why did I just say that? I'm gonna mix in some of this black dispersion pigment. Now this stuff is just opaque. This is gonna be my main colorant. Perfect. Then I've got this white pearl pigment in this really handy little shaker. We're gonna go about that much. Feels pretty well mixed. Okay. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour it down in here, and then I'm gonna take a foam brush and come back in and get it on all those surfaces. That way I can seal those up and prevent any air in the top couple layers. This is also where I get to find out if I sealed this up properly. Hopefully I don't have any leaks. Each 1/4 inch layer of epoxy takes about 45 minutes to an hour to gel up enough so I can then pour another layer. And you don't want to pour the next layer too soon because it'll mix with the previous layer, and then that'll cause the exothermic reaction to kick too soon. This makes the epoxy heat up and set super fast, which then traps all the bubbles inside the epoxy. And sometimes you can literally see the epoxy smoking, which is not good at all. So essentially the whole day I would spend 15 minutes doing an epoxy pour, work on other parts of the project for 45 minutes, and then come back and do another epoxy pour. I'm milling up some maple and then carving the pieces on the CNC for the ends of the cabinet. And let's take a minute to dive into the design so I can show you what I'm going for on this project. So this is a record player cabinet from my pal Nick, who actually got me started with my current obsession with vinyl. I like to use simple geometry to create patterns, and the overall theme of this piece is a circle. Now, the pattern on the top is created by taking a half circle, flipping that around, and then mirroring that half circle so it intersects and creates this woven pattern. That circular design element is then carried over into the cabinet itself with these curved end caps creating a pill shape. Then you have these curved cutouts on the partitions, and then those repeating circles on the doors and the handles. All right, back to the build, and you can see where I had some issues with these carves. Now I'm carving 1.5 inch thick material, which leaves me about 1/8 inch between the top of the material and the collet on the spindle when it cuts all the way through. This should be enough, but sometimes when you cut a piece of wood, you actually release the internal tension, and I think that might be what happened here. Now this caused a few of the pieces to kind of spring upward and then contact the spindle collet and then cause the burning that you see here. I was also having some issues with those carves getting off alignment slightly as it would cut consecutive layers. At the time, I was just thinking this is something I could just sand out, but as you'll see in a bit, this caused some pretty large issues that actually set me back on this project a full week. Here I'm gluing up the individual pieces into this sort of butcher block style end cap, and I was hoping I can force some of those slightly twisted pieces back into square during the glue up, but that was definitely not the case. Okay, switching gears back to the epoxy pours, I was knocking these out in between working on the other parts of the console. These are a few of the final pours, and then I'm swirling in that white pigment to get the desired pattern that I wanted in the finished piece. Another benefit to pouring it this way is I had multiple layers to work out exactly what I wanted in that final top layer as far as how much white pigment to add, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I put the slab on the CNC to plane out the top layer of epoxy and then hit it with some water to see if I liked the swirl pattern that came through. I wasn't happy with this first pass, so I took another small pass and this next layer looked perfect. So I flipped the slab over and flattened the underside until the whole thing was 1.5 inches thick. Okay, y'all, it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the only thing I've managed to get done today is these test carves. This is kicking my butt. That first test panel, I had a bunch of issues with the G code, things kind of getting off, and it just looked terrible. I went back into Aspire, which is the software that I use to import my SketchUp files and then create my G-code, and I got it looking way better. But the problem was I had a couple of these spots where it was kind of carving outside of kind of the boundary. What I did to fix that, on the borders, instead of cutting it at 1/8 of an inch, I'm cutting it at 1/4 of an inch, which I think looks really good. It's gonna be a bolder line kind of outlining the pattern on both sides. I think I've got all that ironed out. Oh God. I just got to do it. I've been avoiding it. Wish me luck. I think I've done everything I can do to mitigate any disaster. Knock on wood. Got my work zero figured out. Okay, let's do this. Okay, for the bottom of the console, I'm using more of that Baltic birch plywood that is left over from taking my assembly table apart, and I can use some walnut veneer to hide the fact that it's plywood. I cut the dados for the cabinet and the partitions on the underside of the top piece first, and this went pretty well. Next, I cut the plywood glue up down to size to match the top and then carved the dados in it as well. And everything was matching up from the top to the bottom nicely. I'd like to make a little public service announcement. I am a big fan of these PSA pressure sensitive adhesive veneers that I got from Rockler. These things are awesome. I used them on the last project. I'm gonna do it again on this project. The 1/2-inch partitions here where the records are gonna go, these are gonna get a maple veneer on either side. And then I've got that maple edge banding that I cut out to match the radius. I'll get the veneers on there first. This stuff is super easy to use. You just use this. This is a J roller or a high pressure roller. I cut the veneers to size, put them on the piece, roll it on there. That activates the adhesive and you're good to go. I'll first seal the top with some Total Boat Gleam varnish and then use some stucco tape to prevent the epoxy from spilling over the sides. Again, I'm going to use Total Boat High Performance 2-to-1 epoxy that's tinted white. Total Boat is a longtime supporter and sponsor of my channel. I've got links for all these Total Boat products down below, as well as a 10% off code that you can use at totalboat.com. Okay, so that looks awesome. I think had I kept the borders thin, it wouldn't have been as strong of a pattern. I've learned through some of my past videos that some of these patterns and some of these tessellations that I'm doing, they actually have names, especially when it comes to quilting. I've had several comments on the last couple of videos kind of explain that, and I just think that's really cool. I'm actually gonna do some research on quilting patterns because, I mean, I didn't know I was doing quilting patterns, but obviously, I like quilting patterns. And look for my new channel dropping soon, Jonny Quilts. Okay, now I can veneer that bottom panel and I have to come back and cut away the veneer to expose the dados. For the edges, I'm using some iron-on walnut edge banding. I also cut some strips of maple to edge band all the plywood cabinet pieces. I glued these on with some wood glue and then attached the curved edge banding pieces to the partitions. Back to the top and the epoxy is cured and I can sand off the excess. The cabinet doors have a walnut inlay, and I need to make a few walnut panels that are 1/4 inch thick from this 2-inch thick walnut board. Now, first I tried to resaw it over on my bandsaw, but the blade was kinked and I didn't have a spare blade on hand, so I had to cut it on the table saw and then use a handsaw to cut the rest of the way through. Not ideal, but it worked in a pinch. Then I can plane those down to final thickness and then carve the inlays on the CNC. I went back to the maple end caps to prep them for glue up, and as I mentioned earlier, this turned out to be a disaster. Let me explain. Okay, so I thought I was all ready to glue this thing up and get into the final assembly, but I'm having some serious issues with these ends. They are not square, and that's gonna cause all kinds of issues. If I was to domino and glue these on the ends, then that's gonna mean that all those partitions in the cabinet, it's not gonna be square. You know, I tried some things to kind of mitigate it off camera, running it over the joiner and trying to flatten these. It helped a little bit, but as you see, that's still nowhere close to being flat. Now the CNC is like a precise, finely tuned machine. And because it's a finely tuned machine, that means it can get out of tune. So I really want to get my machine back to running perfectly smooth and getting precise carves. It'll be fine, but I do have to go get some more lumber. I have to remake those. I have to tune up my machine and kind of test some other design elements to go with this updated design. So yeah, keep your fingers crossed that it works this time. So now, instead of having the ends be a butcher block style glue up, I'm gonna create this sort of skeletonized end out of walnut instead of maple. Now, because of this, I did lose a couple days, and this delayed this project and this video getting out by a week. But in the end, I really like that updated design much better, so I guess it all worked out to be a good thing. Now the main issue is that Nick is showing up later that day to begin the mural, and I have 3 days to completely finish this project because he's got to take it back to Colorado with him when he goes home. Okay, so this is Nick's first day working in the shop on the mural, and the amount of progress that he's made is absolutely insane. Like, it looks so amazing. Now, I had a time lapse set up trying to record him throughout the day. Unfortunately, it died. I have like 2 seconds of footage, but I'm gonna spin you around right now, and I want you to check this out, because like, it is absolutely beautiful, and the colors are just popping, and this guy is just so damn talented. But check this out. We're spinning around, we're spinning. Holy sh! That is amazing. It looks so good. Wow. Okay, well, I got a bunch of work to do, but man, this thing is really coming together, and you know, he's gonna be leaving here in a couple days, so I have to get the project done in time so he can take it back to Colorado with him. I cannot wait to show y'all the finished product. I can't wait to see it for myself, but for that final reveal, it's gonna be awesome. While Nick was painting, I spent some time tuning up the CNC by giving Jabba the Cut a bit of grease. I also discovered that this drive belt on the Y motor had split, and this is likely what was causing most of my issues. I swapped this out, tested out the machine, and it appeared to be running like a champ again. I carved those walnut end curves next and had 0 issues. I had to sand off the tabs and add domino mortises to the ends. As I'm working on this, I want to talk a bit more about that last video and all the really kind comments that I got from my viewers. You guys and gals are amazing, and I truly appreciate your support big time, so thank you. I also like trolling the trolls a bit, so it was fun to joke about being a button pusher. The truth is, whatever your version of being a maker or a woodworker is, that is 100% okay. You or myself shouldn't allow anyone else to define what that is for us. If that's using hand tools, great. If that's building with 2x4s, awesome. If that's using a CNC, well, that's cool too. And I like to equate it to that guy who likes to correct people on the correct pronunciation of gyro. Hey, it's gyro, bro. Yeah, but it's also pronounced gyro, and it's okay either way. And I feel like it's more important for some folks just to prove to you that they know something and then they feel like they must correct everyone else. Don't be that guy. Don't be a gyro. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox and get back to pushing buttons. I carved the doors from some Baltic birch plywood and then added some maple veneer to the outside face. Meanwhile, Nick was absolutely crushing the mural. He's doing this whole mural with acrylic paint and brushes, and he knocked out this 12-foot by 12-foot mural in under 3 days. Now, I met Nick through the running community, and we shared an interest in running crazy long distances through mountains and also telling really bad dad jokes. He's a very talented artist, and one of my favorite paintings of his is a koi fish, so I asked him to paint a koi fish in the shop. Not only did he do this mural, but he also painted me a canvas version to hang in my home, and I am so grateful. It's an honor to build something like this for such a good friend. Nick is awesome, plus he has some pretty sick dance moves. All right, now I'm in the home stretch and it's time to get this thing ready for assembly. I milled up some more maple and then carved the base, which is all gonna slot together with mortise and tenon joinery. I sanded the rest of the pieces and assembled the console, starting with the partitions and building out the cabinet. While the glue was drying, I slotted in the end pieces just to make sure the spacing was correct, but I didn't glue these in place yet. I cleaned up the walnut inlay and then glued those into the door panels and assembled the base. Initially, I looked into buying some brass half-round door handles, and the really nice ones were extremely expensive and they just didn't fit this project. So I decided to make my own handles out of maple with the intention that I would paint them with a gold metallic paint. Although once I had these all put together, I really liked the way they looked and the way that maple contrasts with the walnut and really ties this whole piece together.
That rug really tied the room together, did it not?
This guy peed on it.
Donnie, please.
So I decided not to paint them. Now I can glue in the curved end pieces, and there were a few that slotted into the epoxy section on the top, so instead of using wood glue on these, I actually used Total Boat's 4-minute epoxy to attach them. Another last-minute decision was to frame out the doors with strips of maple to hide the plywood end grain, and to account for the thickness of the maple frame, I had to trim the doors down before I glued the frame on. I'm using some Bloom soft close door hinges to hang the doors, and I made a few templates on the CNC to place the hinges. I attached those handles with some wood glue and then used some CA glue to hold the handles in place while the glue dries, and man, I'm so glad I decided not to paint these. I attached the base with these figure-8 fasteners that allow for wood movement and then attached the base to the console. Everything gets a final sanding, and now I can spray on this Total Boat Halcyon varnish. In my last video, I got a lot of comments about the spray tent, so I'll make sure I'll have a link for that down below. This thing is made by Wagner to be a spray booth. It's not just some tent, and it's actually pretty reasonably priced and very useful. And with that, this project was done. It's such an awesome thing to get to build a piece like this for my closest friend. Now, Nick and I have been through a lot together. We've shared countless miles up and down mountains and through the desert. He paced me during my 100-mile race in Leadville, and I paced him during his 100-mile race. And our friendship started around running, but it's really come full circle to now we get to share our creative processes. And coming full circle is the theme of this piece. And I hope this record player cabinet serves Nick well for many years to come. The mural that he painted is absolutely beautiful, and I love the subtle yin-yang theme hidden within the koi fish. You know, it's that balance between work and happiness, good times and bad, hardship and ease. Plus, it's just a cool painting. I've got lots of really cool projects in the works, so make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss that. Thanks for checking this one out, and I'll see you back here next time.